Bertrand Bell. Sir Bertrand Bell. At your service.
So Bertrand Bell died. But I have taken a break from my inconsolable sorrow to record this video because I think that Bertrand's send-off was really well done. And that's exactly what it was. It was a send-off. This wasn't a traditional player character death, not like Molly in Critical Role Campaign 2 or the dozen or so times Vox Machina members died in Campaign 1 in combat. This was a send-off planned by Travis and Matt. Travis requested that his character get a tragic ending, and Matt ran with that and gave Bertrand Bell, Travis's character, an appropriately tragic ending at his request. It was a send-off to a character that was not going to last through the rest of the campaign. And that's going to happen in some D&D games. A player might be playing a character that they're just not feeling for whatever reason, and they ask the DM, hey, can you help me out and give me a tragic send-off for this player character? I don't want them to just disappear. I want them to have some sort of send-off that could create a cool story moment. Well, that is a little bit harder to do. It's a completely different principle than talking about player character death in combat, because now a player has requested the death. So how do you handle that? Well, there's a lot of ways you can learn how to handle that from Bertrand Bell's death in Critical Role Campaign 3. So without further ado, let's get started. Alright, so what happened? You might be out of the loop if you didn't watch Campaign 3 of Critical Role. Here is what went down with Bertrand Bell. Bertrand is Travis's character that he brought in from a one-shot. He was a higher level than the rest of the party, and a lot of people made the safe assumption that he wouldn't be staying through the rest of the campaign. I was a little bit in denial of this, given how big of a fan of Bertrand I am, but I knew deep down that he was probably not going to stay through the entire campaign. He was probably a temporary player character for Travis, and that's exactly what he was. Travis requested that Matt give Bertrand a tragic ending, and in episode 3 of Campaign 3 of Critical Role, Bertrand goes off into an alleyway after getting a little bit drunk. He draws his blade at an assailant in a cloak. The assailant is faster than Bertrand, unfortunately, gets a stab in Bertrand's gut, and Bertrand falls. So, why did this moment work? Well, it worked for a couple of reasons. The main one is that Travis requested a sad, tragic ending for his character. But Matt and Travis didn't plan, at least I assume, didn't plan all of these beats beat for beat. They didn't have everything scripted out. They knew that Travis would go into the alleyway. Travis would take his character, go into this alleyway, and be confronted by something. I'm assuming Matt gave him that instruction. Go into this alleyway, and then whatever goes down will go down. Then Matt has his dwarf assassin character kill Travis's character, but Travis didn't exactly know that. He didn't know exactly what was going to happen. All he knew was that Bertrand is probably going to die in this episode. He's going to take Bertrand into the alleyway, and something bad is going to happen to him. But he doesn't know exactly what's going to happen to him, keeping a little bit of that spontaneity in Dungeons & Dragons. That is really important. Now, that's not to say that you can't plan out exactly how it's going to happen, because some tragic endings need a little bit more planning. But I recommend, if the player behind the character is good with it, that you keep a little bit of that surprise. Keep a little bit of that tragedy there, because having it happen in a way that is unexpected can retain tragedy in that player playing the character and in the rest of the party. And also, I think this goes without saying, but Matt and Travis also did this. Don't tell the rest of the party what's going to go down. Don't spoil it. Keep it as much of a surprise as you can, whether that's for the player playing the character or just for the rest of the party. A tragic ending is tragic because you don't see it coming 9 times out of 10. So, having it be something that surprises the party will usually be more effective than going, hey guys, this character is going to die this session, just be ready and don't get in the way of their tragic fall to death. Don't do that. I don't recommend that. Matt also masterfully took advantage of the fact that this is a fantasy world and things can happen in dreams. A lot of the cool moments from Bertrand's death happened in a dream had by Imogen, a vision. A lot of the cool imagery in this moment happened in this dream, and it shows that while the death itself was fairly mundane, Bertrand just gets stabbed. He gets stabbed and he dies. But in Imogen's dream, we have these badass images that Matt cultivates, such as Bertrand walking into the Tempest. Just those words, Bertrand walks into the Tempest one last time. That's sick. That gives me goosebumps just saying that. And that is the benefit of working in Dungeons & Dragons, a fantasy world. It allows you to work in things in dreams or in visions, give characters send-offs in a hallucination or some kind of vision that maybe are more grand than just the way they die in the actual reality of the game world. Bertrand just gets stabbed, but Imogen's dream gives it this badass imagery, an image that a lot of fans are going to remember for a long, long time. That is a big reason why this worked for me. Matt also made sure to give Bertrand some last words, which he always does, but Bertrand's last words were also masterfully chosen by Travis. Very, very well chosen. And I'm happy that Matt allowed him to take that moment. So let's just summarize all the reasons that I liked this moment. Number one, it was planned out. Travis got what he wanted in terms of a tragic ending for Bertrand, but it wasn't entirely scripted, so it kept a little bit of spontaneity and a little bit of surprise. Number two, the moment had supernatural elements that gave it more interesting imagery than what was initially described in the reality of the game. Bertrand gets stabbed, but in Imogen's dream, we get more grand imagery that gives it a more memorable feel. Now, there is a fourth reason why I think this worked, and this one is one that I've seen a few people, not a lot of people, but a few people complaining about. I have seen comments that this moment ruined the integrity of Dungeons & Dragons because Matt talked to Travis and planned out a character death. I do not think that that is the case. Travis and Matt wanted this character to go. Travis didn't want to play him for the rest of the campaign, so he asked Matt specifically for a tragic ending. And Matt kept a little bit of spontaneity, but in the end gave Travis what he wanted. And that is okay. Gary Gygax is not going to come down from the heavens if you do a tragic send-off for your characters that is planned out. A lot more people were talking about game mechanics being abandoned in this moment. Like, for example, Bertrand didn't get death saving throws. But number one, I'm just going to say from a game mechanic standpoint, it wouldn't have mattered because every melee hit takes away 2 death saving throws, 3 death saving throws before the assassin gets in 2 hits. And that's assuming that 1, the assassin doesn't have multi-attack and can't attack 2 times in one turn, and assuming 2, that Travis succeeds death saving throws. Unless the assassin misses every hit on a prone target, which is possible, but very unlikely. So, yeah, it wouldn't have mattered even if he gave Bertrand death saving throws. It would have been awkward because Travis doesn't want to succeed the saving throws, and it would have just extended this moment out unnecessarily. So yes, I think it was a great move for Matt to just move the game mechanics aside for a moment to give both his players and the audience a cool story beat. Now, I understand if you don't want to do that, if you want to keep it entirely in-game, you want to follow the mechanics to the T, that's okay, that's your game, that's how you run it, but if you are okay with moving the mechanics aside, I think that that is a great thing to do for the sake of the story beat, especially since it's at the request of a player. It's not like you're moving game mechanics to kill a player when they don't want to be killed. This is a voluntary death, so yeah, I think it's all right here. Overall, Bertrand's death was really, really well done. It showcases that not every player character death will be unexpected and in combat. And I think that it's much easier to create an interesting story beat when the death is planned out. It allows you to plan out how you describe it, how you can communicate it to the rest of the players. And on top of all of that, I think that this is going to open up some really interesting plot threads going into the rest of Campaign 3. I'm very interested to see how the rest of the party react to this death. I have always said that you can build some really interesting stories out of a player character death, but the truth is not everyone wants their character to die. In fact, I'd say that most players want to avoid dying in game, but if a player requests to die and specifically wants a tragic ending for their character, a la Critical Role Campaign 3, then you can build some really cool stories out of that. I'll just end this off also by saying that this is a great example of communication between Matt as the DM and Travis as the player. Travis did not want to play this character for the rest of the campaign. He had another character planned, but he wanted to use Bertrand just for a little bit with a tragic ending. Travis communicated all this to Matt, allowing Matt to build a story around this moment and cultivate it happening naturally. That's great. It shows that communication between DMs and players, that is a huge part of what makes D&D games work and what makes D&D games into the RPG horror stories that we often read on this channel. Communication is key in Dungeons & Dragons, and this moment is an example of why. is a great moment that was built because a DM communicated with their player about what was going to happen and generally how it was going to happen. So yeah, great stuff there. If you enjoyed this episode of Tabletop Tavern Tips and want to let me know, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of my content, then please do subscribe to Crispy's Tavern. And finally, if you want to leave your own tips or thoughts, then go down to the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment, the bell tolls, to let me know you made it to the end of the video. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you all next time. Farewell.